A global poll conducted by Gallup revealed that of the world's 1 billion full-time workers, approximately only 15% of people are engaged at work, leaving an astronomical 85% who are unhappy with their jobs. Furthermore, according to smallbusinesstrends.com and the iHires Talent Retention Report for 2020, it found that 51.1% of Americans had left their job within the past year, and that job dissatisfaction had risen by 7.4%. You can count Jay Bahadur among the group of people who were unsatisfied and unfulfilled at work. While his career as a pharmacist was financially fulfilling, he felt he needed something more. So this pharmacist turned in his lab coat for entrepreneurship, and now he's the founder of Evacuate the Office, in part to help people answer these nagging questions. I feel like I'm wasting the best years of my life. Do I really have to retire to wait to do the things I really want to do? And is life really this boring? Bahadur says he also started the company to help people gain clarity as to what they really want to do. He joined me this week to tell me more about how he's helping people improve their culture at work and placing them in careers that maximize their personal and professional fulfillment. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. So Jay, I want to welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to learn about all about Evacuate the Office. Great to see you on this Friday morning, and thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And Jay, I know that you started your current endeavor, Evacuate the Office, because you wanted a more fulfilling career. I know that you had a previous career as a pharmacist, but why it was financially fulfilling for you, it wasn't necessarily personally fulfilling. So could you tell me about that?
Yeah, for sure. You got to hit the nail on the head. I used to be a pharmacist, which is a financially lucrative career, but for me, not personally fulfilling at all. It turns out money is important, but it's not the only ingredient to being happy. So I transitioned. I transitioned actually into business. The process for me was a lot of trial and error because I don't have a business degree. I don't have any business education formally. So it was tough to sort of break into that market. But eventually I started trying things, testing them, and then figuring out what works. And that's why I really created Evacuate the Office, is to share those tactics, to share the psychology that it takes to change your career. Even if you're not sure what you really want to do, because I was in that place before. And even if you're not sure if you have the right qualifications, because again, that's something I also overcame. So that's really the crux of why I started Evacuate the Office.
Fantastic, and I know that you have a four-step system to evaluate what you really want to do. So I'm wondering if we could dive into those four steps.
Yeah, for sure. So I created a system for myself to figure out what I wanted to do, make sure I was going to get it right. and not make a mistake like I did when I went into pharmacy, because that was, for me, it was certainly a mistake. And that system looks something like this. The first step is you want to assess what you actually can do right now, right? Like, I'm not a computer programmer, so it would be foolhardy for me to go and try to apply for computer programming jobs today without any skill. And that's obvious. Any career coach, any counselor will tell you to assess your skills. But I look at it a little bit differently. I encourage people to look a little beyond the job descriptions. And I'll give you an example. For business, you want negotiation skills, right? You don't typically associate a pharmacist with having negotiation skills. Well, when I was writing down just meticulously everything that I knew how to do, just to exhaust all my options, I realized that I learned some negotiation skills. Am I a world-class negotiator? No. But one example that comes to mind is I had an angry patient who actually threatened us with violence, believe it or not. And I talked him down. And when I remembered that story, I said, you know what, this job did teach me about negotiation. So I should include it when I advertise myself as a candidate for business, right? And I also encourage people to think about skills they want to learn and hone, because stagnation is awful. You want to have something to learn and strive for. So step 2 is just find what you love to do. And that's advice that's also given frequently, but it's very vague. It's very vague. So the way I encourage people to think about it is to think about what you can do all day, and what you do that gets you so engrossed that you kind of lose track of everything else and just get sucked into it. For me, music is one of those things. I just get totally sucked into it and I lose track of time. The step 3, which is a little bit different, is I want people to think about their ideal lifestyle, because that was a big factor for me changing careers as well. I just didn't like the lifestyle associated with working in a retail pharmacy. And we don't learn to think about it this way. We think that our whole life has to be fit into our career, but in today's day and age, I think we can afford to flip that on its head a little bit. So think about the way you want to live. How do you want to spend your time? Do you want flexibility for family? Do you want the freedom to travel around? Maybe you should look at remote work. So that's the third step of my system. And the fourth step is to put it all together. I actually have a free tool called the Career Change Cheat Sheet that puts it all together. And what it does, it's quadrants, and it tells you to list all the careers that appeal to skills you have, the skills you want to learn, things that involve activities that you love doing, and then careers that involve your ideal lifestyle. And once you have that quadrant, you're going to see some repeats, and you should be paying attention, very close attention to those repeats, because that's going to those overlaps are going to be the careers that are going to be satisfying for you. So that's my system. A bit of a long explanation, but that's it. That's how we figure out what we want to do and validate the idea.
Absolutely. And can you tell me about the 3 biggest mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, for sure. 3 biggest mistakes when it comes to changing careers. And I've done all of these. That's how I know. Number 1 is taking the job description way too seriously. There was a time when a job description would say, you must have 2 years experience in this, that, or the other. And I would believe it and I wouldn't apply. And to this day, I just want to smash my head into the wall. I still have friends, despite what I do here with Evacuate the Office. I have good friends that still take the job descriptions too seriously and won't apply if they don't meet every single little criteria. Those are just there because that's their dream candidate. Don't worry about it. Mistake number 2, when you interview or when you network for a new field, you don't want to badmouth the old job. That's a discussion that you want to have with your friends over a couple of drinks, right? That's not something you want to go to the interview and say that I hated this job so much, I hated my boss. What you want to do is focus on the positives of why you want this new career, what is exciting about it for you, and what you're looking forward to the most. And that's going to make you a much more attractive candidate. Mistake number 3, I've done this one too, is using the same old resume for every job. The truth is, nobody cares about your job description. Nobody cares that you were responsible for organizing and something, so on and so forth. Focus on your results. Focus on what you achieved. Get as many specific numbers and metrics as you can. And then share the ones that are relevant to the new position. And use it as sort of proof that, hey, I've done this once and I can replicate that success for you. So those are my top 3 mistakes.
And Jay, I'm also curious to ask you about constructing the perfect, or not the perfect, or the ideal resume or cover letter.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do have a lot to say about resumes and cover letters because, frankly, I've just seen so many awful ones, including my own when I was younger. A bad resume is full of job descriptions saying that I organized, so on and so forth, and I built this and I did that. In reality, nobody cares. I mean, look, I love my dad. He was trying to help me, but when I was 19 and I made my first professional resume, my dad helped me make it, and it was a horrible resume because, again, he was trying to help. I love my dad, but this is a guy that hasn't not applied for a job since 1984. So why was I taking his advice? I don't know. A good resume will focus on results, metrics, and proof. Just proof that you are an achiever, proof that you can do something with the skills that you say that you have. And that's what a good resume focuses on for me. It's I had success here. Let me replicate it for you here. A good cover letter, in my opinion, there's tons and tons of templates out there. You can use those templates as a framework, but don't rely on them. I think it's not good to just copy and paste a template and just put in the person's first name, hi, so-and-so name, and then you use the rest. Now, focus on what excites you about that company specifically so they know that you took the time to research it. The mission, what are they trying to do? Talk about that stuff and why it's relevant to you and how your past actually led to you sitting here in a serendipitous moment almost applying for this job. Make it very specific.
That's some sound advice, Jay, and I want to thank you for that. And I'm also curious to ask you about the job interviewing process and tips you may have for success there as well.
Yeah, for sure. When you're interviewing for a job, especially as a career changer, there's a couple things you have to keep in mind. It's going to be different than a normal job interview within the same field. And what I would encourage you, you actually have a really unique advantage as a career changer. And that's because you have a unique experience that typical candidates do not. You have a totally different perspective and a totally different way of looking at things. And that can actually be an advantage instead of a disadvantage. I'll give you an example from my career. So I was a pharmacist. I transitioned to business. And because I was a pharmacist, I had exposure to the clinical world. I know how a pharmacy works. I know what patients are thinking. So when I'm interviewing for positions in the business world, I kind of understand the day-to-day of healthcare better. I have clinical knowledge. I have a deep understanding of that. And I even understand a little bit more than maybe the typical person in business about the economics of certain things, just because I've been working in healthcare before. Really use that to your advantage. And the other advice I have for an interview is make it a story. Don't just recite your resume because they can see that anytime they want. Make this a narrative, build up about where you came from, what you went through, and how it led to you being here, and why this is the perfect fit for you. That's my advice for a career change interview anyway.
And Jay, you also have a unique perspective on how we should look at the American dream and an ideal job. So I'm wondering if you could dive into that for me.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, when I say American dream, I'm not just talking about America. I know you and I had this discussion last time. You said in Canada, you have a different phrase. So this applies to people in anywhere, really. The American dream for a lot of people for a long time was just survival and stability, which is awesome because some people in the world just don't have that. My parents are immigrants, actually, coming from an economically and politically unstable part of the world. So their American dream was, get a home, get a stable career, and then set up a good life for our kids. Super grateful that they came here and made it so I could have a bunch of these opportunities that they didn't have. And I think in the modern age, we should change the way we think about the American dream because it seems like there's almost an epidemic, at the risk of sounding dramatic, of people just not feeling fulfilled, and work is a big source of people's unhappiness. So let's focus on fulfillment in conjunction with that stability of paying the bills. Look, I know we can't just step away from our jobs and not worry about money. I know money is a very real thing that we need to care about. But how do we balance that? How do we make money and also live a fulfilling life? I think especially nowadays with remote work and all sorts of different cool companies doing amazing things, it's more possible than ever to focus on your fulfillment as well as your financial growth.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I'm also curious to ask you about gaining clarity and overcoming a lack of perceived qualifications.
Yeah, for sure. So gaining clarity. The key there is to take action, and that's why I invented the not I invented is a not the best word. That's why I created the system for that you can find on the career change cheat sheet. But even if you don't use my system, just do something. Just take action and just start writing down, start researching, start using your hands and doing something. I used to take a lot of walks and hope that inspiration would kind of strike me like lightning to figure out what I wanted to do. That's not how it works. That's not a winning game to just wait for inspiration. Take some action, use the system, don't use the system, just do something to start. And as far as overcoming a lack of traditional qualifications, massively oversimplifying this, but there's two key components that I look at, and that's getting in front of the right people and then proving you can actually do the work. Obviously, easier said than done. But if you keep that in the back of your mind at all times, I think it'll guide your decisions in the right direction. And of course, I have tons of specific content on that as well that takes you step by step.
And I'm curious to ask your opinion on the keys to developing a positive and productive work culture and environment. I'm wondering if you had any insight and perspective in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome question because I have been in both really toxic work environments and now I'm in a really awesome work environment. The insight I have is to keep the human in mind. I know that these are businesses and they're trying to make a profit and do whatever they have to do. But I think when you keep the human in mind, it's better for everybody. Obviously, it's better for individual health, mental health, but it also makes you more productive. That's what I find when your managers care and when they give you time to decompress and be yourself, and they don't give you a hard time about taking a day off and using vacation time. You actually want to do work. You want to make people happy, and you just feel motivated more than when the company just doesn't care about you and they're just trying to milk everything they can out of you. Then why would you care? You know, I've been there. I've showed up to a job like that, and I just sat at my desk and just really did the bare minimum to not get fired. So if you want to get good work out of people, foster an environment that lets them be their own person. Just respect that they're human, respect that things happen, give people time, and they'll reciprocate.
And I know that you also have some views on how we can achieve fulfillment as workers and stand out amongst the rest of the crowd. So I'm wondering if you could share some of that with me this
Yeah, for
morning.
sure. Standing out from the crowd, I think from a career change perspective, career changers have a huge advantage there because you have a little bit of a different story than your typical candidate. You came from point A to point B, which is different than the other person's point A to point B. And you really have a lot to offer. You have a different way of looking at problems. You might have a different way of solving problems. And that's valuable to companies. You know, companies are always investing in diversity, especially, you know, in the modern age, and the benefits of a diverse workplace are well known. And that also applies to not just gender and race, but also backgrounds, people from different professional backgrounds and life backgrounds. And as far as the way I think about fulfillment, I think when we're growing up I can only speak to the American school system, but I think it's so backwards the way that we're taught to make our whole life about work. When, especially in the modern age, you know, with so much knowledge work and so much different kinds of work out there now, and people solving interesting problems, why can't we afford to think about making our work fit into our life? Why can't we take time, do the work, and try and figure out what's exciting to us and an impact that would be meaningful to us, and then find work that fits that closely? That's the way I think about fulfillment personally.
Fantastic. And I'm wondering if we can transition the discussion into negotiating for more time, money, and respect, because I know that it's a big part of what you try and instill in people when you instill their own personal value into them as well.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'm glad you brought that up because part of a fulfilling career to me is having enough time, having enough money, and having enough perks to enjoy your life. You know, your whole life doesn't have to be about work. That's my whole thing. To negotiate stuff, I think a lot of people approach this with a me-centric attitude, and that's not the right way to go about it. Because the truth is, sure, your manager might care about you as a person, as a human being, but they don't care about your needs. They care about themselves, their position, and the company's needs, and what's going to be best for them. So you need to make that about them. Yes, you're trying to negotiate stuff that's going to be good for you, but when you approach it, it needs to be about making them look good and making it about meeting the company's goals. So make sure you track everything you do well. Seriously, a lot of people don't do this. I haven't done it for too long. Track everything you do well and have it printed out or in a notebook or just something. Just have it somewhere that you can bring to the negotiation table and say something like, you know, I've been performing pretty well over the past 6 months or so, and I'd like to talk about the possibility of a raise. What a lot of people do, I notice, is they just say, I need a raise. I've been here for X amount of time, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. That's not a compelling reason. Show what you've done and what you've accomplished and what you've added. And when you show you've added value, then you can be taken seriously for that kind of discussion. And don't be afraid to negotiate more than just money. Negotiate time off and titles and even stuff like that, because titles can get you noticed for future opportunities as well. So.
Absolutely. I always tell people that life is a constant game of networking and never to shut down an opportunity to advance yourself as well.
Yeah. You know what? You're right on the nose. That's another thing. Company loyalty doesn't pay. Now, there's great people at companies. You can be friends with those people forever, but company loyalty doesn't pay like it did in the old days. So I encourage people, when a new interesting company hits you up and is going to get you closer to your fulfillment or give you more of what you want, whether that's money or time or flexibility or whatever, yeah, entertain the opportunities. It doesn't pay to be loyal to a company nowadays.
Absolutely. And Jay, I'm also curious to get your thoughts on this. When we spoke in preparation for this last Tuesday, I had mentioned to you that I do a lot of work to promote inclusion for people with disabilities, and I know that that's an area that you wanted more information on. So generally, I'm just going to ask you this general question on how you think we can develop a work culture that includes more people with disabilities as well.
Yeah, okay, cool. We did talk about that. Thank you for sending me that link, because I did want some more education on that. It's not something I look too much into. My surface level thoughts on people with disabilities in the workplace is similar to the way I look at general diversity. When, you know, I know there's a push now for more gender equality, bringing people from different racial backgrounds into the workforce as well. And the way I see it is, why shouldn't disability be any different? Diversity is all in all, you know, good for companies. It's good for work culture. And the way I would think about that is to focus on the human, because earlier I mentioned that I think when you focus on the human, people reciprocate and they do their best work, and it's just a win-win for everybody. So I know last time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, because you are more well-versed in this than I am. You said something interesting last time, Kevin, about making the job description more fit around the person rather than shoving the person into the job description. So, I mean, I'd love for you to elaborate, because I think you had good insight.
Yeah, no, the point of the statement was, if you want a productive situation for both sides of the equation, it's always important to accentuate skills and abilities and strengths of people. I think for people with disabilities, a lot of people don't know, like when we talk about accommodations, they can be as simple as the raised height of a desk, the use of assisted software, or headphones or headsets. So it's really a matter of education, and also the diversification in ideas and thinking. I think that's the key to accepting people with disabilities into the workforce and creating a more inclusive culture.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like, if I understand you right, it's not as difficult as some people might think to be accommodating, but the education is lacking on that.
Well, the education's the biggest part, and what employers would benefit from is understanding that people with disabilities also help them reduce their training costs, increase their productivity, and they show up for work, so you don't have to continually train them, right? So it's always important. Yeah. And I'm also curious for you to comment, Jay, on, equal pay and respect for women. We just had Equal Pay Day for women last month, and it's something that I believe very strongly in, gender equality at work. So I'm also curious to get your thoughts on equal pay for women and the work we still need to do in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. As far as equal pay for women, I think one of the big things to acknowledge is that, yes, we still do need to do work in that front. There seems to be sort of a misunderstanding that that problem's been solved and that ship has sailed like 50 years ago. That would be great, but that's just not the reality. And I know that because a couple of female friends of mine, in the professional workforce as well, every once in a while they hit me up about some kind of messed up stuff that goes on, and it's clearly just discrimination because they're women. Interestingly, I actually interviewed for a job with a cool startup a while ago, and that startup was started by a really smart woman who used to be on Wall Street, and then she was about to become a new mother, and the culture was pressuring her to choose between being a mother and keeping her career. It's like they didn't want her to do both. She has a really, really interesting story. So now she's doing work to help facilitate being a new parent and also keeping your career. Because, I mean, let's face it, when they say new parent, they're talking about moms. Moms have a lot of different things they have to take care of as a new parent, from lactation to, and honestly, I don't have kids, and I'm also not a woman, so I'm not going to get too into it. It's not my experience to share, but they have tons of stuff to take care of, and they bear the brunt, it seems, of suffering when a company says, you know what, choose between your kid and your career. It's just not right. So there's lots of work being done on the private front. I would just like to see more governmental work done, more maybe legislation to make things easier. But right now we're kind of relying on the private sector to work on things here in the States anyway.
And I'm curious to follow up with your thoughts on rebounding from the coronavirus. A lot of people, especially in the gig economy, those jobs simply won't come back, and they'll have to reinvent themselves as a job seeker and say, look, for a second career or rebounding in a similar career that they just left. So I'm wondering your thoughts on successfully rebounding from the pandemic from an employment perspective.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. This stuff is unprecedented. Excuse me. What happened with COVID? Interesting. You mentioned the gig economy, because on the side, before I started to evacuate the office, I was actually doing some freelance copywriting work, and I lost that client because of COVID-19 and economics and stuff. So I started this. This is how I spent my time. As far as reinventing yourself, I would speak to what you've been doing during the pandemic. If you have been out of work for a long time, which has happened to some friends of mine, particularly in the creative sector, I would say focus on what you've been doing. Have you been working on stuff? Have you been creating portfolios? Have you been helping clients on a freelance basis? Prove that you've been using this pandemic, because that proves what kind of person you are. That proves that you persevere, that you're adaptable to situations. And I would focus on that for interviews as well, and say, hey, you know what, during an interview, you can say, you know what, during the pandemic, I was working on this project or that project. It might not be anything related to work, but just the fact that you were working on projects says a lot about who you are. I also want to address that you don't need to be hyper productive during COVID. It's mentally been a tough time on the whole world. So I don't want to make the impression that you wasted the pandemic if you didn't do something incredible and do all this, that, and the other. I deal with that myself, honestly. Sometimes I beat myself up saying, Did I waste my time? Did I not do enough last year? I think, you know, above all else, take care of yourself first though, and accept that it was a tough time, and just, it's okay. It's okay if you needed time and just to veg out for a bit and just chill.
And I have a question for you in terms of volunteerism and highlighting that experience in a resume or cover letter, or, for example, sitting on boards of directors or joining committees. How big do you think people should emphasize their volunteerism experience?
Yeah, a good point. I think volunteerism can be really powerful if you don't have a lot of experience, or if it's tough to make your experience relevant to a career that you're trying to get into. Because again, I think, like what I just said about the pandemic, I think volunteering says a lot about who you are. It says you're driven to do something, and it also talks about your values. I mean, especially if you're going for like a value-driven company, a mission-driven company who has goals beyond just profits. Really talks about, it really says a lot about who you are. Now, in terms, if you do have experience that's relevant to your new career, I would focus on that and then include the volunteerism as an aside almost. But I think it could definitely boost you up a lot. You can also make that a story as well. I mentioned before, interviewing, tell your story, tell your narrative, because it makes you interesting and unique and memorable. Do the same thing with volunteering. Why not?
Absolutely. And Jay, I'm curious to ask you about the advantages of focusing on technology to sell yourself. And what I mean by that is using social media or applying for jobs that are computer based or technology based, and the advantages of doing something like this through Zoom, and whether you think technology can actually be a game changer for people as they sort of reinvent themselves or look to get back into the workforce full time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never been easier to get in touch with people. Now, it's a bit of a paradox because of that, people get tons of communications and might start to ignore them. But in the old days, if you wanted to get in touch with an industry expert or somebody at a company that you just want to network with, I don't know how you used to do it, honestly, because I was born in the 90s. But I can't imagine having to do that without LinkedIn or tools to find email addresses and stuff. I don't know if you had to like call them in the phone book, send them a letter, meet them for coffee or something. It's never been easier to search up exactly who you want to search up. And when you reach out, if you do want to stand out, just be genuine and be specific, be personal, you know, show that you took the time to look into them, show that you respect them, say, hey, I noticed you have lots of years of experience doing this, that, and the other. I'm interested in doing that myself. Would you mind if we just connected briefly? Be personal, because everyone, you know, you and me and everybody in the world, we get all these generic canned stuff in our email all the time. And I even get them on LinkedIn. I just get pitches that I ignore. But I'll tell you, when I don't ignore people on LinkedIn that show that they were specific in reaching out to me. A few months ago, I had a call with someone who just graduated college, just wanted to learn more about the industry I'm in, the company I'm in. And yeah, I took the call because she did the research. Just stand out, but it's never been easier before to find exactly who you want to find.
And I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you think the workplace will look different in terms of business travel and the business expenses and having virtual conferences. Because one thing I think is a positive from the pandemic is it showed business people and executives that they don't necessarily have to be in the office to still the term that you've created. They can sort of evacuate their office and still be productive. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the new normal as it comes to workplace culture.
Yeah. I was actually working remote before the pandemic as well. And that's kind of where the name Evacuate the Office comes from. Is for me, my idea of a fulfilling career was one that was remote, so I could like have the flexibility to visit friends, visit my grandparents and stuff, and not like use up vacation time. And also, I also have unlimited PTO at the company that I work with as well. That's a huge fulfillment thing for me. But yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be evacuating the office permanently when they realize that it's actually lower cost to not have as many people in an office. You can downsize your office. You can get rid of it totally. I think Basecamp is a company that did that or something. Remote work is here to stay. So I would just prep for that. If you do like the office, I know they have co-work spaces and places where you can collaborate and be with others as well. But I think that's forever. And then I think that's so awesome. I think it's going to be a huge quality of life boost just to have the choice, even if you get sick of being at home all the time, just to have the choice that you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever it is. And then business travel, I don't think that's going away. And I think it's because people just like to travel and just be face to face. I'll tell you, some executives at my company, they are super excited about business travel coming back, and they love it. They want to get back out there. But I'll tell you what's going to be different. Maybe it's not going to be as frequent, and maybe we're going to waste people's time less, or be more considerate of people's times, where in the past you'd go to a meeting and fly out there and it would just be like a total waste of time, or they would cancel or something. That happens all the time in the business world. I'm hoping that's done for. I'm hoping we're more mindful. I'm thinking maybe the first communications will be over Zoom, doing stuff like this. And then if it makes sense to move on to the next step, then an in-person meeting will happen. That's my view. I mean, I'm curious about your thoughts as well. How this whole thing has affected you in terms of.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think that remote work and doing conferences over Zoom and other forms of meeting collaboration is also here to stay, because I think that it reduces costs and it has a chance for people to actually boost morale, because they have more sort of control over the bottom line or the final product. I'll tell you, this podcast started because I had shared with you before I was about to start a job, and because of the pandemic, my contract got suspended. So I think it's all about reinventing yourself, coming up with ways to accentuate your passions, because I know you and I share the same synergy of, if you find something you love to do, it's not necessarily work. So, and then you can, or not force, but cause yourself to be more productive if you're happier at work.
Yeah, for sure. Happiness is a big thing. It's a win-win. I mean, it makes people more productive, and then you get to be happier. And I don't know, I think this whole remote situation, it's just, for me anyway, it's far superior to being in the office. But I do get that point that people want some human interaction. Maybe they like collaborating in person. Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it as well. The solution for that, I think, is just going to be smaller spaces instead of the office that you have to be at. Maybe a co-working space, maybe a smaller space that they rent out, something like that.
Absolutely. Hey, Jay, just before I ask you how people can get in contact with you, I'm curious to ask you and end our formal conversation on this question. I'm curious to know, when you're not working, how do you define happiness, and what are you most grateful for?
Yeah, so for me, happiness is, a big part of it is travel, which I'm not doing because of the pandemic. But like I said, lifestyle is one of my considerations for changing careers. I wanted a remote job that gave me the flexibility to do that. During this pandemic time, I'm playing music. That's going for hikes and stuff like that. That's what I'm doing with my time now, working on the blog, of course. And what am I most grateful for? It's that I get to spend a lot of time with people that I care about the most. One thing that makes me incredibly kind of sad to see, and one of the many reasons I started to evacuate the office, is work takes people away from things like that, from family time, from time with friends. And pharmacy was taking me away from that stuff. That's big reason why I got out of it. So I'm just super grateful that when I get old, I'll be able to look back and not be one of those people that has to say, I wish I had more time with the people that I love. So that's mine. And I mean, I'd love to hear yours as well.
I'm grateful for a couple of things. Obviously, besides the prerequisites of family and friends, I'm grateful that I created this platform to have engaging conversations because, doing this line of work, I don't consider it work because I gain more knowledge and I engage in conversation with a lot of interesting people such as yourself. I also value the form of human connection. I love going to networking events, talking to people. On my spare time, I'm a big Detroit Lions fan. It's part of one of my faults in life is being a Lions fan. So, but anyway, I love watching sports. I love apple pie. What else do I like to do? I like to motivate people. I do some motivational speaking on the side. And I'm a big Netflix guy. So if you've got any suggestions on Netflix, I'd love to hear them. But, I've also learned that through this process that, you don't always have to answer an email when it comes directly into your inbox. And I've learned to sort of shut my computer off for 10 minutes a day and just sort of reset myself and check in with myself mentally and try to figure out, do I really need to be doing this now or can this wait? So I think gaining more perspective is something that I'm also grateful for.
Cool. I love the idea of unplugging, even if it's for 10 minutes. Everyone's got 10 minutes, so I like that idea.
Yeah, I always tell people you make time for the things that are important to you, right? So,
yep, for sure.
So, Jeff, my final question for you is, how can people get in touch with you if they're so inclined to do that?
Yeah, for sure. You can find all my content at evacuatetheoffice.com. You can check out the career change cheat sheet if you want to give it a try and get unstuck. You can also just email me at evacuatetheoffice@gmail.com for any questions you might have, any advice or just anything you want to know at all. Yeah, I'll reply back. That's where you hit me up and I'll be there.
Absolutely. Hey, Jay, I really want to thank you for revealing and wide-ranging discussion on workplace culture, engagement, and fulfillment. Really want to thank you for your time and expertise and for joining me this morning. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. I really appreciate you taking an interest and having me on here and having this discussion and asking me some good questions, some of which, stuff I have not thought about before. So thank you.